It always starts with me. We call this also the 1% principle. 1% principle, which means 99% may be out of my control of any situation, right?
Yeah.
And I can obsess and judge and try to control that. I can always come back to my 1%. So as a leader, I always focus on how will I do the most with my 1%, my part, right? So there may be a team conflict. How am I showing up? Honest, empathetic, purposeful? Am I having the conversations? So that's where it starts. As a leader, we start with that 1% principle, and we start to then go from that leading self to leading together. And how do we make that step?
Yeah.
Right? One way I found is helpful is to use deliberate language markers, like lighthouses. Like I just said, 1% principle, right? 1% principle becomes a language marker, and everybody in the organization starts to become aware of like, oh, the 1% principle means I'm not going to be out there judging or blaming or complaining about things. I'm going to figure out what I can do about that. That basically calls people back to themselves, right? So that's a language marker. We use language marker. Another language marker might be then get to the same side of the table. Like our ego mind always wants to think there's Chris and there's me, right? Or whoever the other person is. We are like afraid of ourselves, and we're afraid of each other. Our ego brain is, right? Because we don't have a good history as humans taking care of each other. So we're like, I'm not quite sure. Think about when somebody comes to your door that you don't know. You're like, most people are like, oh, who's that? Right? Especially these days with the overload of spam and everybody tries to get each other in some way. Like, are you trying to get me? Get to the same side of the table. Like, jump over that false conclusion and see what would it be like to be them. That's the second language mark. Lead together on the same side, get to the same side of the table.